So good morning class, I am your instructor for the subject CA3, which is therapeutic modalities. So before we proceed to therapeutic modalities, let's first have a review on CA1 and CA2, which is on your third year. So first, before we proceed to institutional corrections, alamin po muna natin yung pagkakaiba ng institutional correction sa non-institutional correction. So, ang correctional administration po natin ay nahati sa dalawa. Yun nga yung insti and non-institutional corrections. So, bago pumunta si criminal offender doon sa dalawa, insti and non-insti, syempre meron munang krimen na nangyari. Meron munang crime happened. So, first, let's have a review on the Philippine criminal justice system. So the first pillar is law enforcement. Next, prosecution. Third, court. So, pagdating sa court, na-convict na siya. Na-convict na yung criminal offender. Then, he will be sentenced. Saan po siya mapupunta? So, ang karaniwang alam natin, mapupunta po si criminal offender sa jail or prison. That will be traditionally happened. Pero meron naman po sa modern criminology natin na hindi po agad-agad mapupunta si offender sa kulungan. Like for example, nag-avail po siya ng probation or yung nag-serve siya ng minimum sentence sa kulungan. And then, ilalabas siya right away to serve his sentence in the community. So, pag institutional corrections po, sa loob ng kulungan, i-rehabilitate po si offender. At yung non-institutional correction naman po, sa labas. Ang labas na yon ay sa community. Yan po yung pagkakaiba ng non-institutional and institutional correction. Branch of criminology which study punishment for crime or criminal offenders. That is penology. So, pena means pain or sufferings. Again, let's define the correctional administration. So, correctional administration is the study and practice of systematic management of jails and prison and other institutions charged with the rehabilitation of criminal. Ang corrections po ay ang fourth pillar ng ating Philippine criminal justice system. So, they are tasked to take custody, reform, and rehabilitate an offender through either institutional or non-institutional corrections. Four functions of corrections. First, to protect them from the society or from dangerous criminals. Reformation and rehabilitation of offender. Third, deterrence of crime occurrences. And to maintain the institution. Now, let's have the district jail. So, district jail is a facility or a place of confinement for inmates coming from a city or clustered municipalities who are waiting or undergoing trial or serving sentence of 1 day to 3 years. Also have city jail. So, city jail is a facility or a place of confinement for those inmates who are sentenced with a penalty from 1 day to 3 years of imprisonment. And then we have the municipal jail. So this is a facility or a place of confinement for those who are sentenced with a penalty for a term not exceeding 6 months of imprisonment. That is the municipal jail. We also have provincial jail, a facility or a place of confinement for inmates who are sentenced with imprisonment from 6 months and one day to 3 years of imprisonment. Has about the notable personalities in the field of corrections. We have Cesare Vicaria. He wrote an essay entitled An Essay on Crimes and Punishment. So this book became famous as the theoretical basis for the great reforms in the field of criminal law. This book also provided a starting point for classical school of criminal law and criminology. He is Cesare Vicaria, who wrote an essay on crimes and punishment. Take note. And then we have Jeremy Bentham, the greatest leader in the reform of English criminal law. He believes that whatever punishment designed to negate whatever pleasure or gain the criminal law derives from crime, the crime rate would go down. He designed the ultimate panopticon prison. Pero hindi po ito na-build ni Jeremy Bentham. It was never built. And then we have Sir Evelyn Ruggles Bryce. So he is the director of the English prison who opened the Borstal Institution for young offenders. So ang Borstal Institution is considered as the best reform institution for young offenders today. And then we have Zebulon Brockway. So he is the director of the Elmira Reformatory in New York in 1876, who introduced certain innovational programs like the following: training school type, compulsory education of prisoners, casework methods, extensive use of parole, and indeterminate sentence. So the Elmira Reformatory is considered the forerunner of the modern penology because it had all the elements of the modern system. And then we have Walter Crofton. He is the director of the Irish prison in 1854. He introduced the Irish system that was a modification of the Maconochie's mark system. We have John Howard. So he is the great prison reformer, the sheriff of Bedfordshire in 1773, who devoted his life and fortune to prison reform. And we have Alexander Maconochie. He is the superintendent of the penal colony at Norfolk Island in Australia in 1840. He introduced the mark system, a progressive humane system in which a prisoner is required to earn a number of marks based on proper department, labor, and study in order to entitle him for ticket for leave or conditional release, which is similar to parole. Maconochie. And then we have Manuel Montesinos, so the director of prisons in Valencia, Spain in 1835. He divided a number of prisoners into companies and appointed certain prisoners as petty officers in charge, which allowed good behavior to prepare the convict for gradual release. And then we have Charles Montague. He believed that harsh punishment would undermine morality and that appealing to moral sentiments as a better means of preventing crimes. Charles Montague. Next is William Penn. He is the first leader to prescribe imprisonment as a correctional treatment for major offenders. He is also responsible for the abolition of death penalty and torture as a form of punishment. We have Voltaire. So he is the one who believes that fear of shame was a deterrent to crime. He fought the legality sanctioned practice of torture. And then we have the 5 early concept of punishment. First, we have retribution, personal vengeance, or yung revenge, personal revenge. We have expiation, atonement or group vengeance, or ito po yung repayment for the crime na ginawa. Repayment sa ginawang krimen. We have deterrence, serve as warning to a future violator. And then we have the 4th one, protection. This is for securing the society. We have the last, reformation, to change of behavior for helping them to reintegrate back in the community. And that's the early concept of punishment. And now let's discuss the historical perspective on the development of corrections. So, on the 13th century, considered as the securing sanctuary. So, ito po yung the criminal offender will claim refuge in the church for a period of 40 days. So, he will claim his protection inside the church for a period of 40 days. And in England, on the year 1468, so torture as a form of punishment. So, sa taong ito, sa England, ang torture po ang pangunahin nilang punishment for the criminals. So, yung pagpapahirap or yung pagpaparusa po sa criminal offender is by torture. So, actually, there are certain forms of torture. Meron po tayong tinatawag na whipping. Ito po yung beating with a whip or strap or using rope as a form of punishment and so on. On the 16th century naman, transportation of criminals or what we call banishment. On the 17th to late 18th century, death penalty became prevalent as a form of punishment. So there are also different forms of death penalty. There are forms of death penalty. We have beheading or pagbitay. We also have firing squad. We have stone to death, burning at stake, susunugin ka ng buhay. And we also have garrote. What is garrote? It is a method of execution by the use of strangulation or ang pagbitay. And then on the 1835, so the transportation of criminals was abandoned in the year 1835. And now we will discuss the golden age of penology. Period from 1870 to 1880. So ito po yung tinawag nilang golden age of penology because there are 5 important events happened from that period. First, the National Prisons Association was established in Cincinnati, Ohio. The second, on the year 1872 naman, the first International Congress was held at London, which established the National Penal and Penitentiary Commission. On 1875 naman, nagkaroon po sila ng headquarters na was established naman po in Hague at Hague, Netherlands. On 1876, the Elmira Reformatory was established in New York. And lastly, the first separate institution for women were established in Indiana and Massachusetts. Yan po yung 5 events na nangyari from that period, kaya tinawag po itong Golden Age of Penology. And now we will discuss jails. So jails is a pre-trial detention facilities operated by English sheriff. So historically po, ang jail was predominant in British, until at which point jail became the more popular option in the year 1935. Next, we have galleys. It is a long, low, narrow, single-decked ships propelled by sails rowed by criminals. So, it is on the 16th century po. So, remember we discussed earlier that on the 16th century, the usual form of their punishment is called banishment. So, ito po yung ginagamit nila during that time to transport criminals. And then we also have hulks, former warships to house prisoners in the 18th and 19th century, also known as floating hells. So in the 18th and 19th century, this is also known as floating hells. And now we have to discuss non-institutional correction. So, what is the overview topics on non-institutional correction? So, first question is, what is institutional corrections? So, it refers to a community-based program where a person is subjected to the following privileges such as probation, parole, and executive clemencies. And by the way, we already discussed this. We already differentiate the meaning of non-institutional corrections. And again, non-institutional corrections, in short, wala ka po sa kulungan. You're serving your sentence outside the prison. Or doon ka po sa community mag-serve ng sentence mo. Then we have probation. In Tagalog, subok-laya. So it is a disposition under which a defendant after conviction and sentence is released subject to conditions imposed by the court and the supervision of a probation officer. This is based on PD 968, Section 3. So that means, kailangan pala, after conviction, pag naibigay na ang sentensya, there is a judgment already. But not final and executory. Kailangan, pagkaka-judge pa lang sa isang criminal offender, kailangan po nila agad mag-apply ng probation. So remember, probation is granted by the trial court, or kung tao ang tinatanong, it is called trial judge. A court who tried a case is the only one who has the authority regarding for the probation. And again, let's define probation. This is based on PPA DOJ, Attorney Manuel Gico. So it states that probation is a privilege granted by the court to a person convicted of a criminal offense to remain in the community instead of actually going to prison or jail. So this means probation po is just a privilege granted po for the adults. While for minors naman po, it is a matter of right. Pero, mapufall po dito yung PD 603. And also remember that probation is only for a criminal offense. Bawal po yung administrative case, bawal ang civil case, only criminal case. And next, we have parole. So parole is the conditional release of a prisoner from correctional institution after serving the minimum period of his prison sentence. So when you apply for parole pala, dapat final and executory judgment. Unlike ko sa probation, may judgment lang but not final. So remember that the one who grants parole is the Board of Pardons and Parole. And then we have executive clemency. So it refers to reprieve, absolute pardon with or without parole conditions, and commutation of sentence as may be granted by the President of the Philippines. Let's discuss the forms of executive clemency. First, pardon. So there are two kinds of pardon po. We have absolute pardon and conditional pardon. So pag absolute pardon po, without imposed conditions. Siyempre, ang conditional pardon naman, may mga attached na conditions. Amnesty naman, ito po yung mga taong convicted of political offenses. Ang reprieve naman, ito po yung pansamantalang pagpigil. And then lastly, we have commutation of sentence. Ito po yung pagpapababa ng sentensya. That would be all. Thank you for listening. God bless. See you on our next topic.